Hi there. We're ready for part 2 of the mini lecture on Congress, Article 1 of the Constitution. In the last mini lecture, we talked a lot about what the Constitution did setting up the House of Representatives and the Senate. This is what you get from the Constitution. But since this article was a little longer, we stopped, and now today we're going to do continuation, Article 1, Congress, Part 2, Article 1, Section 8. So if you will get out your constitutions and follow along with me. The powers of Congress are in Article 1, Section 8, and this is a list of the things that Congress has the power to do. This is what the Constitution, how the Constitution empowers the House and the Senate. All right, let's look at the list, and this is a list, so we're going to go down and we'll go rather quickly, and I hope you'll follow along. Also, please read the annotations about that and the commentaries. Section 8, Clause 1 says, the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes. The very first one, laying and collecting taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debt and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. Then it goes on to say, but all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. So it means that if you're importing something into California, the duties, imposts, excises, taxes, and so forth on that has to be the same as if you are importing into some state on the East Coast, for example, or across the Mexican border, or from Canada, or whatever. It created a vast common market. We've heard about the common market in the Eurozone, in the European Union, but we created a common market back in 1787, 1789, when we wrote the Constitution. And this means that if you're importing or going across state lines, you have a completely open market of 50 states. Clause 2 says that Congress has a power to borrow money on the credit of the United States. And you've heard in the news a lot about us borrowing lots of money. Clause 3, Congress has the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations among the several states, regulating commerce among the states, and with the Indian tribes, because in those days, 1787, 89, Indian tribes were Indian nations as well. Clause 4, Congress has the power to establish a uniform rule of naturalization, and that means how you become a citizen if you're not born in this country. And uniform laws on the subjects of bankruptcies throughout the United States. We have lots of big companies in bankruptcy. American Airlines, for example, is in bankruptcy at the moment. Also, Hostess cupcakes and Twinkies are in bankruptcy at the moment. Clause 5, Congress has the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof and a foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures. We're still not on the metric system, and that's because Congress has seen fit to keep us in our old way instead of as most of the rest of the world goes. Clause 6, Congress has the power to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States. So if you counterfeit, that's a federal crime. Congress establishes post offices and post roads that they used to take to move the mail. Clause 8, Congress has the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for a limited time to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. That is patents and copyrights. Clause 9, Congress constitutes tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. That means the Constitution will set up the Supreme Court at the top of the federal judicial system, and then any lesser federal court, district courts, courts of appeal are created by Congress. They can also destroy those courts if they want to, but not the Supreme Court. Congress has the power to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations, against pirates. We have pirates today on the seas again, taking hostages all over the world. Congress has the power to declare war. Only Congress can declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. Congress has the power to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. So every 2 years you have to reappropriate for defense purposes. To provide and maintain a navy is Congress's role. To make rules for government and regulation of the land and naval forces. To provide for calling forth the militia. To execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. The militia is the state National Guard. All right. Congress can provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia and governing them and so forth. And then Clause 17. Congress exercises exclusive legislation in all cases over such district not exceeding 10 miles square as may by cession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress become the seat of government of the United States. That means that Congress rules over Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is not a state. It is a federal district. It's 10 miles square, and the land on which Washington, D.C. sits was donated or ceded to the national government by 2 states, Virginia and Maryland. So all property in Washington, D.C. is federal property, and Congress sees over that jurisdiction. And then Clause 18 is very, very important. This is called the Necessary and Proper Clause, or the Elastic Clause. It reads like this. Congress has the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers, and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. This is one of the most important clauses in the entire Constitution, because when the founders wrote the Constitution and made the list of the powers of Congress, they could not foresee necessary things which would happen in the next 200 or 300, 400 years. And so they put in this elastic clause. It's almost like this. If you had a piece of elastic sewn together, and maybe the diameter was about like this, all right, you could take that elastic and you could stretch it way out. You could put your foot in it and stretch it many, many times. This allows the Constitution to keep up to date. And let me give you an example of how that might work, or how it actually did work. Remember, Congress can't just do anything they want to do. They have to base what they're doing on one of the specific powers of Congress. And those powers that we've been talking about are called the specific powers, the listed powers, the enumerated powers of Congress. You have the power to tax and borrow money and regulate commerce and so forth. Well, in the early 60s, we began to experience in the world airline hijacking. And so Congress was moved to make a federal law making it a federal crime to hijack an aircraft. Well, there's nothing in the Constitution that was written back in 1787 which talks about aircraft. But they had to base it on one of the specific powers of Congress. And so they based it on the piracy one, because it was piracy in the air. And they used the elastic clause to stretch that to cover airliners and aircraft. So this is how Congress has to work to keep the Constitution up to date, and this little necessary and proper clause actually allows them to do that. Now, the next thing is, the next section of these powers are powers denied to the Congress, things that Congress can't do. And the first one was that they could not stop importing slaves into the country. We were a slavery nation, particularly in the southern states back at this time. And so they wrote this section 9, clause 1, which said you can't deny slavery, or you can't prohibit slavery into the country until at least 1808. 1808, Congress prohibited the importation of slaves into the country. It didn't prohibit slavery, but it did more slaves coming into the country. Very interesting section. Clause 2, powers denied to the state. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion the public safety may require it. Habeas corpus is very important to all of us. It means produce the body, and we're talking about your body. If you're arrested, for example, they can't just throw you into the jail and forget you're there, because your lawyer will come out and that he or she will issue a writ of habeas corpus to the court and saying, produce my client. You have to at least charge my client with something and hold them over, get an indictment, or let them go. So very, very important to all of us. Clause 3, no bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. I'm going to let you read that in the commentaries there. No capitation or other direct tax shall be laid unless in proportion to the census or enumeration herein before directed to be taken. That means we will not have an income tax. Let me repeat. That says, Clause 4, we will not have an income tax. The way they used to do taxes was that the states would count up the number of people in the census, and then the federal government would decide how much federal money they needed, and each state would tax their people however they wanted to, and had to send in a pro rata share based on their population to the national government to do national government things, defense, post office, etc. Well, we weren't collecting enough money. So in 1916, if you look over, or 1913 again, if we look over at the 16th Amendment to the Constitution, at the back of the Constitution, you will find an amendment which says, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportion among the several states, and without regard to any census or enumeration. You may hear or read in the paper of someone saying, I'm not paying my income taxes because it says in the body of the Constitution I don't have to. That person is exactly right. It says in the body of the Constitution no income tax. But the person didn't read far enough. It has been amended since 1913 that we have an income tax. It brings in plenty of money for the national government. Clause 5, no tax or duty laid on articles exported from any state. You can have import taxes, but no export taxes. This was to help trade abroad. No preference shall be given by regulation of commerce or revenue to the ports of one state, nor those of another. No money shall be drawn from the treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law, and a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. This hopefully has stopped people just raiding the treasury. You have to have a congressional appropriation of money, and you're having good accounting all the time, keeping track of all that money. Clause 8 says, no title of nobility shall be granted by the United States. We don't have any kings or dukes or Duke of Earl or anything like that. No person holding any office of profit or trust under the states shall, without the consent of Congress, accept any present, any emolument, any office, or any title of any kind whatever from any king, prince, or foreign state. If you're in Congress, can you take money, contributions from a king, prince, or a foreign state? Nope. It's very, very specific. And I think some members of Congress in the past have tried to do that, and they've broken the law and had a little time in prison. The next group are powers denied to the states, and I'm going to let you read those in your commentaries. And that's the end of Article 1. A very, very interesting article, but it lays the groundwork for the workings of Congress. And as you read your chapter, I think it'll make it more interesting and meaningful to you. We'll see you next time for the next mini lecture. Have a good day.